I'm Diane Bowen from Covenant Eyes, and welcome to today's Facebook Live, where we have the privilege of talking with Dr. Mary Ann Leyden, who's joining us today via Skype. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Leyden. She is a psychotherapist and director of education at the Center for Cognitive Therapy at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the director of the Sexual Trauma and Psychopathology Program and the director of the Social Action Committee for Women's Psychological Health. She co-authored the book Cognitive Therapy of Borderline Personality Disorder with Newman, Freeman, and Morse. She has written numerous chapters on cognitive therapy, especially on treatment of borderline personality disorder. She co-authored a chapter with Linnea Smith called Adult Survivors of the Child Sexual Exploitation Industry in Cooper's book Medical, Legal, and Social Science Aspects of Child Sexual Exploitation, a comprehensive review of pornography, prostitution, and internet crimes. So welcome to Facebook Live, Dr. Leyden. It's great to have you with us today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So the first question we have for you is, what is the mission that drives your work?
Well, when I started doing psychotherapy, which is more than 31 years ago, I treated a number of patients who had been traumatized either in their childhoods by sexual violence or traumatized in their adult lives by sexual violence. And to see the scope of the damage that this does, the length of the damage that this does, some of the people were damaged decades beyond the time of the experience. And so this gave me an interest in this topic. I also began to notice that every case that I treated that involved sexual violence also involved pornography. So I wanted to figure out what was the connection. As I treated the victims, I also wanted to try to figure out what caused the perpetrators to do what they did, because I knew that we weren't going to be able to solve the problem just by healing the victims. There were too many victims. There are millions of child victims in the United States and millions more adult victims. So we won't fix the problem by healing them one at a time. You can try to fix a problem by pulling people out of the river, but sooner or later you have to go upstream, see who's pushing them in. So I wanted to look and see what was causing the perpetrators, and then I began to see the connection. That when I talked to perpetrators and listened to their beliefs and the behaviors they engaged in, I saw a pattern that said I learned to think certain things and do certain things, and they were the same messages that were sending in pornography. And I then said, okay, this is how it works. One of their teachers is pornography, to think the way they do, to behave the way they do. And so we'll solve the problem better by preventing the problem, and preventing the problem is going to involve getting perpetrators not to perpetrate, which means not teaching them to think the things they do that become permission-giving beliefs for the way they act, that become triggers for their behavior. And so one of the sources of that change is to look at the impact of pornography on the society and look at what a change in that impact would do. As we've gone on, now I started in the 1980s, I started as a psychotherapist in '85. That was before the internet. And once the internet arrived, we saw that over time, almost the entire population was being exposed to pornography. So when we do research now, we can't find young adult men who have not seen pornography to be in part of the control group. There just don't seem to be any who haven't been exposed to pornography. So if we're trying to get a control group of non-exposed adult men, you can't hardly find any, with the internet exposing almost invariably almost 100% of young males to pornography, and sometimes even without their choosing. So young children are often exposed without actually searching for pornography. So the exposure becomes universal. When we started looking at the research of, well, what does this exposure do? What does it teach them? What does it teach them to think? What does it teach them to behave? How does it teach them to behave? We saw that the damage is pandemic. The problem showed up in psychological areas. It showed up in physical areas. It showed up in relationship. It showed up in legal areas. It showed up in financial areas. It showed up in spiritual areas. There was hardly any area of their life that it didn't impact. We said this is a pandemic problem in the sense that almost all the people are exposed and almost all the areas are damaged. This is one of the reasons we've been encouraging people to think this is a public health crisis. If all the people are having an effect, either by being exposed or by interacting with somebody who's been exposed, and the damage is in all these other areas, you can't solve this one person at a time. You have to solve it on a basis in the society, to change the society, to change this exposure. So we looked at the massive amount of research that shows the damage, all the areas of damage, and said, these are the things we need to target. We need to educate people as to all these things that the damage is. Now, sometimes, and with the patients that I work with the males, let's say, who are either sex addicted or perpetrators, they begin to realize at some level that it hurts other people, that pornography hurts other people. So if I, in the therapy, as we go on, if I ask them, do you want your mother to be a prostitute? Would you like your wife to be a stripper? You want your sister to be a porn actress? 100% of them say no. And I said, well, why not? If this is not hurting anybody, why wouldn't you want the women, you love? I said, well, they know at some level it hurts women. They just don't want the women they love to be hurt. They want somebody else's mother, somebody else's wife, somebody else's daughter to do these things. So it starts to damage them in their own sense of themselves, that they know they're hurting people, and their own sense of self-esteem, their own sense of who they are is being damaged. Now, some of them do act out as perpetrators, and they say, oh, okay, they move on to the behavior. Some of those do that because they try to twist their thinking so that they don't know what they know. They try to tell themselves, this isn't really hurting other people. And so then they act out, they say, these things are normal. These things that I see on the screen, this is what everybody is doing. So if everybody's doing it, I'll be doing it. And so that becomes a permission-giving belief and a releaser for them to do it. So some people know it hurts other people. Some people try to twist their mind into thinking it doesn't hurt other people. And even that psychological backbending of twisting your mind is not good for them. And so they start to see the hurt to other people. Some of them, it takes a bit of time for them to see the hurt to themselves. Many of them don't connect the physical damage of pornography to themselves. They don't know why they're having sexual functioning problems. Now, some of them will come up with theories as to why they're having sexual functioning problems, and they don't typically understand how sexual functioning comes to be. So all of us maybe are naturally sexually interested, may naturally have sexual arousal, but we're all taught. We have to learn how to act on that arousal. So there are many things that we're taught, and the sexual template of those things we're taught could be broadened very easily. It's very easy to spread that template and add new things. Sexual arousal's very rewarding. So anything we hook to something that rewarding can get learned very easily. And we've even found that, like with fetishes, if you show men pictures of women who are nude except for a high-heeled boot, they get sexually aroused by that image of that woman who's nude with the high-heeled boot on. Very quickly, if you just show them the high-heeled boot, they'll have an erection. Like, okay, that's not natural that you would get an erection to a boot, but we can teach you to have an erection to a boot by just hooking it to a naked woman. So when they look at pornography, all the things they see get hooked to sexual arousal, and those all become part of their sexual template. So if they're having sex, let's say, that's a one-way street. I'm looking at a screen. I don't have to think about what that woman on the screen needs, what her arousal is about. I don't have to please her. I don't have to think about her emotional state. I just think about myself. Now, sexual narcissism is part of the sexual template. I've learned to have sex that's only about me. Always about me. What am I feeling? What am I wanting? Well, that's not very good in relationships when sex is just about you, but now that's what we've taught them. So the sexual desire is natural, but the teaching them to be sexual narcissistic is learned. And that's one of the things that porn teaches you. Be sexually narcissistic. Think only of yourself. Or sometimes they use the internet porn and they have to use it quickly. They're using it on their jobs, let's say. I treat a number of men who go to their jobs and are using internet pornography on their jobs. And not only does that risk their career, because many of them are at jobs where they have zero tolerance for going on those websites, and so they put their career at risk. A number of men have lost their jobs. A number of men I've treated have lost their careers, lost their license that they worked hard for because of what they were doing on their jobs. But often they're using it on their jobs in a way that says, get to the outcome quickly, get to the sexual completion quickly, so that quickly becomes part of the sexual template. So now I'm trying to get there fast. Well, that's not very good in relationships either. And so you'll see men who, when they try to interact with women, have premature ejaculation because that's what they've been taught by the porn, to go fast, to get there fast. So now the things the porn teaches you causes these sexual dysfunctions that the men are not hooking to. That's why I'm having this problem. I didn't realize it was being caused by the pornography, that I'm having premature ejaculation or retarded ejaculation or sexual dysfunction where I can't get aroused to an actual woman. So the men who are using pornography, most of their erectile dysfunction problems only show up when they're with a person. It doesn't show up when they're with the screen. So now their sexual functioning is just with a screen. They can't actually function with a person. But we think that natural sex is with people. So we don't think that we're built to have sex just with screens. We're actually thinking people want to have sex with other people. And so we've made it impossible for them to have sex with other people. So they're noticing they can function fine as long as they're with a screen, but they can't when they're with a person. So part of it is what they're learning from the pornography, and they're learning to interact with women who are not physically natural. So many of the women are surgically changed, and they're thinking, oh, this is what women should look like. Well, most women don't look like that. It's sort of like Barbie doll, it's like, oh my gosh, women don't have that shape. They don't, if Barbie was an adult woman, she'd have a 19-inch waist and a 42-inch chest. Those things don't go together. So Barbie, and in fact, in the interesting history of Barbie, she was a doll that was a prostitute in Germany before she came to Barbie and became a doll for children. She was a prostitute doll in Germany and looked like a prostitute. So, but the women in the porn don't look natural because they're surgically changed. So now men get aroused to only surgically changed women, not to the women in their lives who are not surgically changed. Sometimes women feel pressure to get surgically changed, even though we have a number of studies that say women who get breast implants are 3 to 4 times as likely to commit suicide. So this is not an enhancement to their life. It's a decrement to their life that now they want to look like porn actresses. Now the men only get attracted to women who look like porn actresses, so that this is a downward spiral in the relationship and their ability to function with people. So narcissistic and fast and surgically enhanced. And then they start to develop tolerance. So when men binge on pornography, it has some of the same effects of other kinds of drug binges. That is, they develop tolerance so that what they naturally found arousing, and it might have been pictures of men and women having sexual intercourse, when you look at hundreds of thousands of images of that sort, they're not arousing anymore because you've exhausted the neuron response to that. So they have to get a harder kind, a more stimulating kind. And so then they add in new kinds, kinds that involve violence, let's say, because that's now stimulating, because violence is arousing. And I think many people don't realize that the human arousal system is one system. So the system that says my heart races and my breathing goes fast and my palms get sweaty, which is the sympathetic nervous system, and there are a number of other responses, blood pressure responses and so on. It's just one system. So fear causes those responses. Sexual arousal causes those responses. It's the same responses. It's just the context that you're in, whether you're afraid or sexually aroused. So now when they're looking at violence and it produces anxiety and fear, that stimulates the arousal system. So now that's what they need to get sexually aroused, is violence. Sometimes they're now asking their partner to engage in this kind of violence. The partner may say, this is painful, this is degrading, I don't want to. But this is now what he needs to get aroused, because the binging and on the other kind has exhausted that kind, and now we need to go on to the harder kinds. So now he can only get aroused by things that are degrading and hurtful to her. So now we've set up a situation where sex between men and women, only one person is enjoying that. And so instead of it being an intimate, physical, loving interaction between two people who both wanted and enjoy it, instead of it being part of the glue that holds couples together, it becomes a toxic piece that is the acid that's pushing them apart. Because only one person is enjoying it, the other person is having an experience that's either painful or degraded because he needs that now to get aroused. He may also develop tolerance that goes farther than that. It's not just violence anymore. Now it's things that are toxic. It has to involve feces or urination or children. And so if they start to look at images of children that are sexually stimulating, they can start to see children as sexually arousing, either in the imagery or in real life, so that you can spread that sexual template to include that. So now we're setting up a toxic soup where he can only function under certain circumstances, not with women that look like real women, not with women that aren't what we call clickable, because men go online and they just keep clicking until they find exactly the breast, buttocks, hair, face, hip type that they want for that particular image. But when they're with a real woman, she's not clickable. You can't change her breast, buttocks, hair in a moment. So now he needs all of that super normal stimulation, all the millions of kinds, all the kind that's arousing, whether it's violence or involving toxic things, things that he initially found disgusting. Men will tell me they initially found images of people having sex with animals disgusting, but as they developed tolerance, then they needed that arousal. That produced the arousal, and they moved on to that. So they didn't initially find that, and we don't think that it's natural for humans to want to have sex with animals, but somehow tolerance pushes them into, so now they are having that arousal. And arousal for real women starts to become not enough. It's not arousing enough. It's not stimulating enough because their brains are overstimulated and toxified by the images that they've seen. They've also gotten the messages that they have a right to have sex any way they want to, and we send this message throughout the culture that men have a right to sex as if it's a need, like it's something that you die if you don't get it. You know, it's like air. Like, okay, you don't actually die if you don't have sex, the way you die if you don't have air. So if it's a need, then you have a right to it. So men feel like, I'm sexually entitled to this. If in human research where people believe in, have a sense of what I have a right for, if you infringe on their rights, there's a natural process in humans that become angry at unfairness. It's called the just world hypothesis. Seems to be built into humans. Unfairness makes people angry. If men think they have a right to have sex with women and women refuse them, they get mad. They get angry because they're right. Their need is being blocked. So you see so often men being violent with women in sexual interactions, not just because they've taught and seen images of sex and violence connected, but because they feel that their sexual entitlement has been infringed on. And so now we see men who are either physically violent with women, or a very common experience is men who go to prostituted women, and once they've completed the sex act, are violent against those prostitutes. Beat them up, head injuries, shoot them with a gun. It's a very common thing that men are violent with prostituted women. And there's a sex and violence connection there, like that. And in some ways what happens with men when they go to prostituted women is that the disgust response they have to that behavior is blocked while they're sexually aroused, because sexual arousal blocks the disgust response. As soon as the arousal's over, the disgust response comes back, and now they're furious. And so you'll see some men who get very aggressive after sex, or aggressive when women don't agree to have sex. So you see a connection between the pornography use and the sexual violence and the prostituted women. And if you expand the template, the prostituting of children, all becomes a seamless connection between all of these things. You can't really carve out one piece and say this piece is separate from the others. They're all interconnected. So our sex lives become quite pornified as the men believe these things that pornography says. And then it's also one of their teachers. So we don't do a great job of teaching people about sexuality. Sometimes we teach them in school about here's how you put on a condom. Like, you think that's all we need to know about it? So we don't teach them about the emotional aspects of it. We don't teach them about the spiritual aspects of it, the commitment aspect. We don't teach any of that. And we don't even teach them well about sexual functioning. So men often look at pornified women and say, this is how women function. Men will say to me, I know that women love anal sex. And I'm thinking, well, the research says between 80 to 95% of women say they hate it. So I'm not sure how you got the message that they love it, because women say they actually hate it. And they said, well, they've seen it in the movies. They've seen women who were having that experience, who were smiling and saying, I love it. And so then they believe the movies. They believe their eyes, because their eyes are very stimulating. And so they said, women must love that. When their partner says, I don't love that, they decide something's the matter with my partner. She's not a real woman. She's not a sexy woman. She's a frigid woman. She doesn't like what real women like. And they've been miseducated about female sexuality. The men who tell me that women have orgasms when they perform oral sex on men, like, oh, where did you get that idea? They saw it in the movie. Like, those movies are made up. That's not real. So now they think this is how women function. It's like, no, they don't. This isn't it. So they get miseducated about sexuality. Women get miseducated as well. So some of my college student females come in and say, I don't work right. I say, what do you mean you don't work right? Well, I don't have an orgasm when I perform oral sex. Like, you think that too? We heard that from the men, and now you think women have that? So the women are being miseducated. And so we've seen that in research. The women who are looking at pornography also get toxified by it. They say, this is how women function. This is how men are. All men are narcissistic and predatory and out of control. Like, oh my gosh, did we mean to teach women that all men were narcissistic and predatory and out of control? How are you ever going to have a relationship with one if you think that's the way they are? But the women say, but that's the way they see them in those movies. They're all predatory and violent and out of control. So now the women start thinking all men are like that. They start to accept relationships are like that. We see in the research that women who look at porn are more likely to be victims of non-consenting sex. Like, oh dear. So the men are more likely to perpetrate, the women are more likely to be victims, toxifies their relationships with their spouses. A complete debilitating process for both sides. It's sort of like slavery, you know. In slavery, both the slave and the slave owner are destroyed by the slavery. The user and the used are both destroyed by the pornography.
You know, that brings up a really good question, that this sounds like it's a problem not just for men, but for women as well. And maybe is it a different context of problem for men and women, or do they both share the same results from the problem?
Well, the problem is quite complex, because even on the male side, but on the female side, it's also complex. Many women don't look at pornography except when they're with a partner who's encouraging them to look at pornography. So their pornography use is often in a couple's relationship, but now it's toxifying the couple, while men often look at pornography alone. So that's a little bit different in terms of the problem that they're experiencing. Women sometimes look at pornography to try to learn how to do sex. And so they're getting the miseducation problem. Or they're trying to look at pornography to find out what men like, and they're getting the miseducation problem. Or they're getting the I'm more likely to be victimized problem because I'm tolerating these kinds of behaviors. Women can get addicted to pornography, and we see women who start to have that same kind of problem where pornography becomes the source of their arousal and they're addicted. Sometimes they start to have difficulty having sex with males, and now they're having sex with the screen as well. It's not as common, partly because women often have sexual drive that is relationship-based, where men are more visual-based. But you have to teach men to expand that visual base so that all of their sexuality now seems to be about a body part, because men can be relational in sex too, But if you teach them it's all about a body part, then they'll go that direction. Where women are typically relational, you can teach them it's about a body part and they'll go that direction as well. So anything that you put in will have this possibility of effect. So women can get addicted to it. Partly people don't understand the nature of addiction. We think that we get addicted to a drug, but you don't really get addicted to the drug. You get addicted to what the drug does to your brain. And that when you put something in your mouth or up your nose or in your arm, you don't experience it till it hits your brain. Well, if you put it in your eye, it hits your brain even more quickly. So the porn addiction is very strong, and women can get that as well.
You know, since this is a problem that hits both men and women, and it sounds like in different ways and affects their entire set of relationships, that even how they relate to children and to others, what resources would you have available to help people, and how would they take advantage of those resources?
Well, first, it depends on what kind of problems they're having. So if you are an individual who's just having difficulty restraining yourself from going online, but you already have the realization that you need to do that, because some people don't have that realization, but if you have that problem but you realize you need to restrain that, but you're having difficulty, software programs like Covenant Eyes are wonderful for this. So it's like, get the program, get the accountability coach in there, get the filtering software, do that. That's a tremendous aid for that person who's motivated, who realizes they have a problem, who knows they need to not go online. If you have the problem where you go online and you don't even realize you need to stop doing that, you may need some psychotherapy help to help you identify the problems that it's causing you. And there are any number of individual therapists who work with sexual addiction. There are online programs that are available. There are some that are spiritually based, like Faithful and True Ministries is one of the spiritually based programs. There are programs for young men that are not spiritually based, like NoFap or Fight the New Drug. There are websites with a lot of information, like Your Brain on Porn, to help educate yourself of what does this do to you. So if you're missing education, go to those resources. If you're needing some psychotherapy help to identify, go to those resources. So there are a lot of resources that are available either online or in groups. There are spiritually based groups. That Man Is You is a spiritually based group that you can engage in. You have to be careful of some of the sex addiction groups that are peer-led. Now, they're available all over the United States. Some of them tend to be triggering, and so it's like, okay, you need to stay away from those that are actually triggering you to act out. So you need to be careful about joining into groups like that. But there are a lot of resources online, as well as psychotherapists who now work with this. If you have a problem that you can't seem to deal with on your own, as well as there are problem solving for women. Dirty Girls Ministry is focused on women who are addicted to porn. So that's available online for the female who's struggling with this.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Layden, for joining us today. Your insight is just remarkable. You've taught us so many things, and we just really want to express our appreciation for being with us live, Facebook Live today. And if people have questions, can they contact you, or do you have an avenue by which they can contact you?
They can email me at the University of Pennsylvania. My email address is available, and so they can contact me and ask questions about resources or more information. And I just want them to know that help is there, hope is there, restoration is there, that all of these things can be solved. We can be better. And I like to close with a quote from Roger Scruton, who said, "Pornography threatens the loss of love in a world where only love brings happiness." And we are all capable of love and happiness. And so that restoration, that hope is there. Education is the first step. So thank you for bringing this information to the public. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.